when I drove by, I had my high beams on, and all I could see was just some streaks of red going down his body, starting at his head. I'm kind of in the middle of the woods at the moment.
Yes, sir. I'm familiar with the area.
What the fuck?
What was that, sir?
That's not human! That's not human!
911, what's your emergency?
He was driving home after midnight on a quiet highway. Then he saw something on the shoulder that made him call 911. Before he could finish the call, something slammed into his car, and everything he recorded that night was supposed to stay hidden. The man was driving down Highway E-3 on a rural stretch of road in Carolina just after midnight. It was the kind of highway that exists in that strange void between towns, where the darkness feels heavier than the trees surrounding it. The road was empty, no other vehicles, no signs of life, just asphalt stretching ahead into the black and trees standing like silent witnesses on both sides. He was heading home after a long day, staying calm and alert, listening to low-volume radio to keep himself awake. Everything was normal. Everything was routine, until he saw the figure on the shoulder. At first he thought it was a man, maybe someone stranded, someone who needed help. The shape looked human enough. There was a shirt, torn and tattered, and the upper body seemed to be covered in something dark, something wet maybe. The figure was stumbling, moving in the opposite direction of traffic, walking in the wrong lane. But the more he looked at it, the more wrong everything seemed. The proportions were off. The figure was too tall, too thin, impossibly thin. And the way its head tilted back, bent completely backward like something that had no spine, made it seem like it wasn't looking at the road at all. It was smelling the air, inhaling deeply, tasting something on the wind. Startled, the driver didn't hesitate. He sped up immediately, his instincts screaming at him that something was fundamentally wrong with what he was seeing. His hands moved before his mind fully processed what was happening. He grabbed his phone and dialed 911. His fingers shook as it touched the screen. The call connected. A dispatcher's voice came through, calm and professional, asking what his emergency was. On the recording of that 911 call, which was later released to the public, his voice shook as he tried to explain what he was looking at. He said he didn't know what he was seeing. He said that whatever was on that highway, whatever was walking on that shoulder, it wasn't a human being. It was something else, something that wore the shape of a man, but moved wrong, existed wrong. Before the dispatcher could ask another question, could request more information, or begin to understand what he was reporting, something happened that cut the call short. Something slammed against the back of his car. It wasn't a bump. It wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate, forceful impact, sharp and metallic, the sound of something heavy and solid connecting with his vehicle. And immediately after that sound came a scream, a high, stretched-out scream unlike anything the driver had ever heard before. Not human, not animal, something caught between both. A cry that seemed to contain multiple frequencies layered over each other, distorted and wrong. The kind of sound that makes your nervous system react on an instinctive level, triggering a primal fear that you can't explain or rationalize. The call cut off shortly after that. Later, when a reporter managed to locate one of the driver's closest friends, the friend agreed to talk, only off the record. He was protective of his friend's privacy, but he also felt like the truth needed to come out. He said the driver had been acting strange the entire day before the incident. not just a little off, noticeably strange. He kept rubbing the back of his neck, constantly, like something was bothering him there. He was glancing at doorways in a way that suggested he was afraid something might come through them. He kept saying over and over again that he felt like something was watching him, like something was tracking him, like whatever it was had already found him and was simply waiting for the right moment.
The friend also revealed something darker. He said the driver had been having nightmares. Not one nightmare, multiple nightmares. For 3 nights straight, every time he closed his eyes, he experienced the same terrifying vision. In these dreams, a tall figure would be standing outside his window. It was there at night, lurking at the tree line in his yard, visible only as a silhouette against the darkness beyond. And in each dream, the figure would lean toward the glass, slowly and deliberately, getting closer to the window, pressing itself against it. But it never stepped any closer. It never tried to break through. It just stood there, at the window, breathing on the glass, watching.
Residents who lived near the exit where his car finally stopped, the place where the driver managed to bring his vehicle under control, came forward with their own accounts. One woman said she heard something in the woods that night, a fast, dragging run mixed with heavy, broken breathing. Not normal breathing, broken breathing, like lungs that weren't working quite right. Respiratory patterns that were irregular and wrong. Another resident reported hearing a voice, a warped cry, almost like a scream, but underwater, distorted by pressure and distance and something else entirely. The kind of sound you hear and immediately feel in your chest, in your bones, in the deepest parts of your brain that still remember what fear feels like. When authorities found the driver, he was sitting in his locked car, shaking uncontrollably. His hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his fingernails had cracked. Blood had run down his palms from where his nails had dug into his own skin. He was repeating the same thing over and over again, like a mantra, like a prayer, like a warning he needed to give to anyone who would listen. He kept saying the same sentence, his voice breaking, his body convulsing with fear. He said, "It knew my name," over and over. "It knew my name. It knew my name." Officials attributed the statement to shock. They explained it away as trauma, as a mind breaking under stress, as psychological fragmentation caused by extreme fear. His friend didn't agree with that assessment. He knew the driver. He had known him for years, and he said something was different now. Something had fundamentally changed. The friend said the driver had been sleep-talking for days before the highway incident, whispering back to someone no one else could hear, having conversations with an invisible presence. Someone was calling him from a distance, someone tall. The friend heard fragments of these sleep talk sessions. The driver would whisper back to this presence, responding to questions only he could hear, answering in a voice that didn't quite sound like his own, like he was being controlled, like something else was speaking through him. And there was one final detail that nobody could explain. When the car was towed later that morning, when the vehicle was being removed from the highway, the tow truck operator allegedly saw something standing in the woods, just a silhouette, completely still, elongated, impossibly tall. tall, watching them through the trees. The operator saw it only for a moment, only long enough to register that something was there, only long enough to know that something was observing them. But that moment was enough. The tow truck operator refused to return to that area at night again. He refused to take any jobs on that stretch of highway. He refused to even drive through it after dark. Whatever he saw standing in those woods, whatever presence he felt watching him, it changed something in him. It convinced him of something he couldn't articulate, something he wouldn't fully explain to anyone. But the message was clear. There was something on that highway. Something was watching, and it was still out there.
The driver knew his name, but did it know his address? Did it follow him home? Subscribe now, because the highway wasn't where this story ended. It was where it began.